When I was 9 years old, I still today remember the excitement of being around at a friend's house and her handing me this book. And this book wasn't linear, like every other book I'd ever read. It allowed me to make choices and decide what was going to happen and roll dice to make the next lot of decisions. And that book, of course, was The Warlock of Firetop Mountain. So I'm delighted to welcome Ian Livingstone, and my 9-year-old self just can't help but go, I'm so excited, this is going to be brilliant. Ian has been working in the games industry for over 40 years, making the transition from analog games to digital games, and now becoming very involved in the schools in our country at the moment. So without more ado, because I know you're all dying to hear what he has to say, please join me in welcoming Ian to the stage.
Thank you, Nick. That's brilliant. So yes, I'm going to talk about my life in games to add some context to what for the things I now believe in and my hopeful contribution to education of children in this country. And I do that through games. I think games is a wonderful contextual medium for children to learn and to discover the great world. So if we kind of reel back a bit, when we are born into this world as babies, we interact with that world and we learn through play. Play is natural. No one tells us what to do. We just discover our own curiosity, gets us to learn naturally. And as we get older, we enjoy solving puzzles. There's a lot of gratification of the problem solving and doing things like Rubik's Cube. And when we apply rules to these puzzles and play activities, they become games. And I joined the games industry not long after chess was invented in 649 AD. Started a company called Games Workshop with two old school friends, Steve Jackson on the near side, John Peake in the middle, and the really handsome guy on the far side, and that's me. And this was, it was 1975, and we wanted to turn our hobby of playing games into a business of making them. And the way we did that is that we produced this full-color glossy magazine called Owl and Weasel, and we sent it out to everybody who we knew in the gaming world. One of the copies found its way to Gary Gygax in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. We hadn't sent it to him directly, but he got hold of a copy, wrote to us and said, love your magazine, please find enclosed a copy of a game we've just released. It's called Dungeons & Dragons, and I don't know who's heard of D&D? That'll be everybody then, great. So as you can see, it didn't look much, but it opened up the world of the imagination like no other game had ever done before, and probably no other game ever will again, in that it's all about conversation and role-playing and going on these incredible adventures of the mind, role-playing as heroes, wizards, clerics, endless journeys of fantastical worlds, finding treasure, killing monsters, and living to fight again, and leveling up. And it was all about you, your alter ego, having these wonderful times. So Steve and I became immediately obsessed with D&D, played it a lot. And we ordered 6 copies of D&D, because that's all the money we had in our world. And on the back of that incredible order of 6 copies, we got an exclusive 3-year distribution agreement for Europe, because Gary Gygax was also living out of his apartment, and he thought this was an incredible order, and he found a UK distributor. So we decided to zoom over to the States and sign up all the new fledgling games companies. And in this particular slide, on the far side is Fritz Lee, the science fiction author. Next to him is Gary himself. Next to him is Professor Barker, who invented a game called Empire of the Petal Throne. Next to him is myself holding the boxes. Rob Kuntz next to me, one of the authors of D&D, and Steve smirking at the front. The worrying thing about this particular slide is the 3 guys to my right are all dead, and I'm kind of next in line, but I'm still here, folks. And we also got to meet Miss Wisconsin, 1976. I don't know what she's doing today, but I'm enjoying myself here at Warwick University. And we came back, and we ended up getting slung out of our flat because the landlord didn't really enjoy all these people arriving, going up and down the stairs, parcels and stuff, because of course Games Workshop wasn't a shop, it was a third floor of an apartment block in Shepherd's Bush, and we didn't have a phone in the apartment. Clearly mobile phones hadn't been invented, and he just got sick and tired of hanging up on all our Games Workshop people with their telephone cells. So we go to the bank, got this great game, it's a role-playing game, you're a hero, wizard, and you kill monsters and you find treasure and all that stuff. And he looks at you rather like a dog watching television, and with absolutely no comprehension whatsoever, and urged us out. So we had to make a choice whether to have somewhere to operate from or whether to have somewhere to live. So we found a small office the size of a bread bin at the back of a estate agent, and we were obliged to live in a van for about 3 months, which was parked next to the little office. Fortunately, it was also next to a squash club, so we could actually get out the van, go for a shave, shower, etc. Got really good at squash by default, and into our little mail order stuff. So we eventually opened our first shop in 1978 in Dowling Road in Hammersmith in London. This was the opening queue. You're all too young to have been there, but we're trying to do were you there? I need your name and your email address later, because we want to do a reunion shot at Abbey Road reunion shot. You're the third person I've got so far. Brilliant. Might be a little bit problem doing it, of course, because today it's the Bosnia-Herzegovina Community and Advice Centre. So if anybody else here is good at Photoshop, also let me have your name. But of course, Workshop's grown up since then. It's now a publicly quoted company. I'm no longer associated with the company, but it's doing brilliantly well on the back of Warhammer. We only had a 3-year distribution agreement for D&D. And when I talk to students who want to start their own career, building video game studios or starting off in life, I always say to them, make sure you own your own intellectual property, because there you control your own destiny, you build value in your companies. We didn't actually own D&D, so that's how Warhammer came about, to replace that, and the whole value of Workshop really is built around ownership of that IP. At Workshop, we used to run these things called Games Day. I don't know if you've ever been to one of the Games Day, but the one in 1980 was quite a significant one for Steve and I, because the whole hall had about 5,000 people playing kind of basic D&D, very rudimentary gaming, exhibitions everywhere. But there was also an editor from Penguin Books attended with a stand, just selling their normal books. And she was completely bowled over by the enthusiasm of the people playing Dungeons and Dragons, and talked to Steve and I after the event and said, would we like to write a book about role-playing games? It just seems quite a phenomenon. And we said, well, rather than writing a book about the hobby, why can't we write a book that is the hobby, allow to make it a game out of the book rather than just a book about the subject matter. So Penguin Books hummed and hawed for about a year, decided it should be Puffin, should it be Penguin, are these books going to be any good anyway? Very strange idea to have a non-linear book. But Geraldine Cook, to her credit, really fought hard on our behalf and finally convinced the MD, who was originally told about it at Penguin Books, and apparently laughed out loud and held his head in his hand, saying interactive books couldn't possibly be successful. But she was relentless in her pursuit, and so the first Final Fantasy game book that Nicola talked about, Warlock Firetop Mountain, came out in 1982, quickly followed by several others, despite no marketing at all from Penguin. This was effectively because of the power of the playground. The viral spread at that time was through word of mouth, always the best viral spread, of course, whatsoever. And these books were different. If you don't know what they are, these were books in which you, the reader, were the hero. You made all the decisions. You needed dice and a pencil to keep a record of how you were getting on in your adventures. And you had to make a decision at the end of each paragraph, whether to turn left or right, simplistically. If you find a key in one room, you'd be able to open a room further on in your adventure. And there were hundreds of ways of going through these books, but only one real true path. And a lot of them led to failure, But people weren't punished for making mistakes. They instantly wanted to go back and start again. And it was, people now say, effectively the gamification of literature. It had a branching narrative with a game system attached to it. And it also inspired a lot of creative writing, got lots of reluctant readers reading for the first times in their lives. And also empowered a lot of fans were creating maps and drawings of monsters and rice and road adventures. We were actually bombarded by a lot of incredibly wonderful material created by the readers. So net result was they were published in over 32 languages, 17 million copies sold. We were told recently that literacy increased by 17% because of children taking control of these books, being empowered, being engaged, and making the decisions. That was a lot more a wonderful experience for them than linear books, where they may or may not care about the hero or heroine in those books. So we thought this was great, but there was no internet at that time, of course, and therefore the joy that children were having didn't surface into the main media. Main media was largely critical of the books. So, for example, we were expecting great, well done, this is great, getting kids reading again, but the Evangelical Alliance published an 8-page warning guide about the books, saying because you're interacting with ghouls and demons, you're absolutely going to get possessed by the devil. A housewife in deepest suburbia phoned in her local radio station and said that having read one of my books, her child levitated. So the kids are thinking, for £1.50 I can fly? We'll have some of that. And the local vicar near Penguin Books threatened to chain himself to their front railings until they were banned. Of course, I'd like to thank them all for incredible PR they did on our behalf, because Penguin didn't do any of themselves. But it was actually quite serious, some of the stuff. This magazine talked about danger, children at play. Children actually participate through their imaginations. God forbid they did that. That's a terrible thing that they should do that. There was a petition sent into Penguin Books, but I have their addresses still. I might get right back to them one day. These worried parents wanted these books banned because children were immersed in reading and wouldn't communicate with their parents. God forbid, again, that should happen. And it just kind of worrying that history has never been kind to games. Back in the 1850s, Scientific American was criticizing chess, saying people should do much nobler things with their minds and waste it on trivial activities like playing games. And when it comes to video games, of course, the media goes into an apoplectic frenzy when talking about games in the main. They always talk about the 5% of games that are 18 rated. They never talk about the 95% of games that are family friendly and doing such wonderful things, which I'll talk about a little bit in a bit. So, how did I get into video games? Well, we sold out of workshop in the early 90s, and I was asked to write a game called Eureka for a startup company called Domark in London. And I joined that company after leaving workshop, and that company was metamorphosed into adding 3 other companies to create a new company called IDOS, which we floated on the London Stock Exchange in 1995. And of course, the most famous game that IDOS produced was Lara Croft Tomb Raider. So getting back to video games, where they all come from, it really started off with Pong, the first commercialization of games. I mean, clearly it wasn't sold for its graphics, but it had that addictive gameplay, that sort of little fairy dust that made you want to go back and try it over and over again. So while I have a drink of water, let's go a little down memory lane of some of the early games. It seems quite strange that it's 20 years since Lara Croft first started bombing into doorways and killing endangered species. But this is the 20th year of our anniversary. Amazing. So who actually created Lara Croft? Well, it's this guy called Toby Gard, who was an artist in our studio, Core Design, in Derby. And he'd been tasked to create a character to replace a character called Rick Dangerous. It was a PC game. The coming consoles were coming, PlayStation, and the whole industry was kind of getting to grips with recognizing copyright, because Rick had a slight similarity to a film star whose name I've forgotten. And everyone thought he was going to create a new male character, but he'd seen the rise of girl power, seen Tank Girl, Nana Cherry, and thought, wouldn't it be great to have a female lead character for a 3D character in a 3D world? So this was his original sketch of what he called Lara Cruz. Nobody thought that was a pretty English-sounding name, so somebody went through the telephone book and came up with the name Lara Croft. And again, getting back to the intellectual property idea, what started as a sketch became a multi-billion dollar franchise. And as Lara Croft became a pop culture phenomenon, gracing the covers of lifestyle magazines as well as games magazines. And all these companies here, major brands themselves, wanted to use Lara Croft to promote their goods and services. So that was good for two reasons. One, they were paying us a fee for doing so. At the same time, we're promoting Lara Croft as much as they're promoting their own. And just for a bit of fun, I'll show you one of the ads that Lucozade did. Well, I won't show the Lucozade ad. I'll show you the Visa ad. We're using Asia to promote Visa. And of course, she didn't go unnoticed by Hollywood. Hollywood had created their own characters from books, comics, etc. And now they're seeing the power, the influence, the cultural impact that video games was having. And we managed to get an executive producer role when Paramount Pictures wanted to produce the movie, and when Larry Gordon, the producer, said to us, we'd like Angelina Jolie to play the role of Lara Croft. We said, that's absolutely fine with us, no problem whatsoever. Yeah, I did get to meet her a couple of times, still recovering from that. It was a tough job, but somebody had to do it. But more seriously, we've seen games move from a niche to a mainstream audience. Children play games, young people play games, old people like me still enjoy playing games. And we see the games everywhere, largely thanks to Apple and smartphones, games platform in everybody's pocket. It's become very pervasive, which is good to see. And it's even seen games now as a spectator sport with esports. And I'll just show a sort of small video, short video of what's happening in esports, people playing professionally for money now, having a huge impact. This has come out of Asia, and with hundreds of millions of people watching through live streaming channels like Twitch. So, 100 million people watching live games on Twitch, 100 subscribers to Steam, a downloadable portal for games onto PCs. The way the new consoles, Xbox One, PlayStation 4, have grown at a faster rate than any other console iteration before. And yet, for many people, console games are challenging. They get a little bit confused by having to manipulate 15 buttons, but then along comes Apple and really nails the user interface with swipe technologies, just dragging your finger across the screen. You can interact with an incredible number of games. The only problem they have is that there are 2 million games trying to reach 2 billion people through the world's smallest shop window, and for every Angry Birds, there's probably 10,000 dead birds out there as people struggle to get into the top 100 of games. My only tip, if you're thinking about releasing your own game on the App Store, is make sure you have an icon with an open mouth. That's really important. All these games have been very successful. So no matter what you're doing in education, open mouths, please. So the whole industry is worth $100 billion a year. This is an incredibly large business, a great opportunity. Innovation all the time because of advances in technology, VR, now AR with Pokemon Go, the impact that Pokemon Go has had on societies everywhere. The warning I saw this morning in the station, be careful you don't bump into a train as you're playing Pokemon Go. But what we're all here for is why we think games are good as a learning tool. What is good about games that the media never seems to talk about? Well, I talked earlier about how interactive books in the analog world improved creativity and literacy. There's been a revival of board games, and I put it right. I'm a board games collector, by the way. I've got over 1,000 board games at home. Let's get that out there right now. But the social element of board games is wonderful. Doing the deals and working out best strategies, of course, is a powerful learning tool. But in video games, they're social. We come together to play more often than not. And games require you to problem solve. You cannot get through a game without problem solving. It's absolutely impossible. Games give you continuous assessment. You see how you're getting on instantly. You get feedback, and you're not punished for making mistakes. You can fail in a safe environment. It's okay to be wrong, and it's okay, and more than okay, to try again. Games contextualize real-world environments. Game like Roller Coaster Tycoon, where you take control of building a theme park, build the rides, set the prices, do the staffing, and if you do it right, the artificial intelligent customers will come in, and if you don't do it right, they won't come in. So you're managing a real world and using a real cross-curricular engagement in solving the problems of running a theme park. And this is just wonderful for children. They're having fun and they're learning a multitude of skills. Games like SimCity. I remember back in the day, the geography teacher would stand up and say, "Today, kids, we're going to do urban regeneration." And you can see the color draining out of the children's faces as they thought, "Oh no, what are we going to do?" But if they can take charge and control of that city and see what impact their decisions have on this simulated city, this is a great thing. And they can learn so much more through the medium of games than they can just listening to somebody drone on about stuff they're not really interested in. Again, say with history, civilization, you can step into history, see what effects the choice and the consequences of your actions have on the future of the world. A game like Portal, you can teach physics, a wonderful way of teaching physics, and even ethics in a game like The Walking Dead. And of course, you're all familiar with the impact that Minecraft has had on the world, of children in particular. Effectively digital Lego, building these wonderful 3D architectural worlds where they're sharing with their friends. It really empowers creativity as children aspire to make the most wonderful worlds. I mean, who wouldn't want to become an architect after playing Minecraft? And games are already used with training grown-ups, but they don't see them as games. They think simulation is not a game. Of course it's a game. We're teaching surgeons or pilots or armed forces, simulating real worlds through play. And games can be used for rehabilitation. Of all people, jumping around in front of the TV, playing Wii, it really motivates them. So if you can park your prejudice against one or two titles that are 18 rated and do have some violent content, that's okay. They're not meant for children. Adults do them the same way as adults watch X-rated films. If you'd never seen a film before and I asked you to go and see Texas Chainsaw Massacre and write a critique of the film industry, it's probably likely to be quite negative. And similarly, people who've never played a game before, they've heard about Grand Theft Auto and they assume every game in the world is terrible. But of course it isn't. And if you think cognitively what's happening when you're playing a game, interactivity, problem solving, the critical thinking, the analysis, the social aspects, these are real skills for the real world. And it's fun, it's an enjoyable learning. And that's what children should be doing. They should be enjoying themselves when they're learning rather than having to write down things which they might not necessarily enjoy. There was a program last year on Horizon and talking about games, and they did a test they asked some old people to come in. They did an MRI scan of their brains, looked at their cognitive activity, gave them a tablet of games to play for a month, came back, another MRI scan, and their cognitive activity had increased significantly. And the conclusion was maybe they should prescribe tablets to play on rather than tablets to swallow. Might be better for old people. And if you still need convincing about games, there's some great work being done by charities using games. I'm a patron of special effects that use gaming technology, modifying devices to give children with severe disabilities a quality of life they would not have had otherwise. So check out special effects. Wonderful work that special effect do. And maybe one day we'll get this. Probably not in my lifetime, but never mind. So we can play games, we enjoy playing games, but how do we actually make them? There's some incredible games made in the UK. Little Big Planet, Tomb Raider, Started Life in the UK. There's lots of studios, over 1,000 studios. These are some of the ones I'm associated with today. How are we going to get more women into making games? Games have to reflect the society in which we live, so we need diversity in the creation of games to represent everybody. We are a very creative nation. Look at our film, our fashion, our music, our architecture, publishing, and of course our games. And games combines art and technology like no other entertainment medium that I know of, with all the different component parts, making this wonderful interactive experience. But we have had a shortage of computer programmers in this country. Through my own experiences, I went to the then Cultural Minister Ed Vaizey and told him that the plight of our industry, that we're reliant on so many people from overseas to take up major roles in our game studios and other studios, way beyond games, from everything, as games is just one part of, obviously, of digital technology. So Ed Vaizey tasked Alex Hope and I to write a review called Next Gen. You can download it from the Nesta website, should you so wish. And we wanted to show how we could turn our children from being consumers of technology into creators of technology. Because we really are at a crossroads. There's a book by Douglas Rushkoff, Programmed or Be Programmed. Are we going to want to be in the driver's seat or the passenger seat of technology? Do we want to control technology, or do we want to allow ourselves to be controlled by it? The world is shifting monumentally because of technology. You know, what happens in an internet minute, the number of Google searches, the number of Ubers that are run, the number of tweets that happen. It's beyond belief what's happening right now. So we have to be at the forefront of directing where technology is, rather than being in the back seat and just being allowed to be dragged along by it. And our review, Next Gen, really focused on schools, and ICT, as was taught, as being largely unfit for purpose, boring kids to death with Word, PowerPoint, and Excel, then requiring them to have a GCSE on Excel after a year, and you wonder why they were being bored. Rather than teach them how to create their own technology, they were just simply about use. And I'm going to show a little bit of the video we made in support of Next Gen, which again you can download if you wish. Vimeo is on the screen there.
I think all the special effects are made in America.
I think all the big video games we've made in China, Japan.
Special effects and things don't usually do them out of this country, places like New Zealand.
Video games are probably made in Silicon Valley around San Francisco.
America. China, Japan. America and Japan.
America.
New Zealand.
Japan.
San Francisco.
Now I think we've come an age where we can actually be proud of what we're doing, because we are creating great content which is culturally, socially and economically important to this country.
In a digital age, schools and universities are failing the creative industries. There are a few shining examples of best practice. What we want to try and do with this report is make those shining examples the norm.
One such example of best practice is a primary school in Girvan on the west coast of Scotland, where pupils are learning a whole host of creative and technical skills whilst making their very own video games.
I made the biker follow a path, but Kodu has to stay off that path so he doesn't bump into the biker.
I've made a game with a factory with bikers coming out, and then I'm a jet and I'm trying to reach that star.
This game's design project wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for forward-thinking teachers like Avril Denton.
I think CoDo is more motivational. We're teaching a lot of these skills, problem solving skills, math skills, language skills. It motivates them.
Problem solving, puzzle solving, choice and consequence, intuitive learning, management, simulations, social aspects, and even dexterity. They are a great thing.
So if you want to watch more of it, please go online. So we made a number of recommendations, the main one being to put computer science on national curriculum as an essential discipline, because this was nothing new. Computing at schools was really important. Back in the 80s, the BBC Micro was a cornerstone of computing in schools, and at home, everybody had a BBC Micro and a Spectrum at home. But the government really didn't want to respond to Next Gen, so we started up the Next Gen Skills Coalition, and Eric Schmidt, chairman of Google, referenced Next Gen in his Q&A after his Matt Taggart lecture. And of course, if Eric said it had to be true, and the then Prime Minister said we should do more for computer science in schools, and the then Secretary of State, Michael Gove, to his one credit perhaps, did disapply the old ICT curriculum with the new computing curriculum, which is a great starting point, and it's now law that every school in England, primary and secondary, offers computing as part of the national curriculum. So it's here, and this is the starting point, so we really are just taking off, and we've got to make sure it doesn't explode as we take off. So who's going to teach the teachers? Well, if teachers don't feel confident enough to teach computing, they should allow a sort of joint learning experience with the children in the class. There are so many resources out there, they're all free, incredible amount of stuff that people can use and allow to learn together. I'm writing a book about it as well, Hacking the Curriculum, out next year, blatant self-promotion. We do talk about computational thinking in the main, multiple solutions to problems, not just one, and how we break down problems into their component parts. But I'm running out of time, so I'm going to have to move on very quickly. But the initiatives that Digital Schoolhouse are doing.
The workshop that we're doing today is animating algorithms. It's a workshop that's broken down into two parts. The first part is a Computing Unplugged workshop, where students will learn about algorithms, using algorithms in our daily lives and bbots. And then the second workshop is one that's a practical workshop using the DIY gamer kits. The overall aim is for students to actually understand what an algorithm is and how to break down a problem and solve it using step-by-step instructions. First of all, they'll learn about what daily algorithms are, so such as brushing their teeth or playing a DVD or something like that. We're encouraging them to think about what they do on their daily routine and how it's not just automatic. They're actually breaking a problem down and actually doing it step by step without realising. So something like brushing their teeth, that there is a moment of realisation when they see how such a simple, what they thought was a simple task, is actually quite a complex routine. They then use that knowledge to then go on to write their own algorithms for a scenario. So they're identifying different steps, and then from that they go on to work with bbots. Bbot is like a tiny robot in the shape of a bumblebee, and it has keys on its back which you can press to program it to move. We provide the students with a scenario. The scenario will tell them what the bbot has to achieve. It gives them the problem, and they have to write down the steps and the instructions, and then they go ahead and program the bbot and see whether or not they've correctly instructed the bbot to do what it's supposed to do. They're an educational tool used mainly by primary schools, but we use them with our girls in years 7, 8, 9, and it's a really fun way to learn how algorithms work.
And I guess all that fun fancy games and seeing what games do in a very wonderful way to empower children to learn is what led me to want to apply to open my own free schools. First one will be opening in London next year, operated by Aspirations Academies Trust. And learning by doing, games-based learning, and computer science is going to be at the heart of these schools, because I would say that computer science is the new Latin, because it underpins the digital world in the way Latin underpinned the analog world. And you know, from my own experience as well, the only thing that interfered with my learning was my education, as Albert Einstein says. And Generation Z are different. They have prolific use of social media. They are connected. They share everything with their friends. And yet, We require them to learn in many ways in a way that has long since passed. And the world is changing rapidly, as we know. 65% of children in school today will have jobs that don't yet exist. And the Secretary of State for US said, education is to prepare children by giving them skills for jobs that do not yet exist. And the World Economic Forum recently said that the skills that are required for the future in 2020, problem solving, critical thinking, are the skills that are required by children of the future. So I'm not saying this is what exists in classes today, but in many ways that format still exists, which was okay back in that day because all the children would learn the same skills and be plonked into a factory, and all they had to do was perform the same skills, so it didn't matter. We didn't want to have these individual thought process, but we're living in a very fluid world now that is people constantly on the move. And those jobs that were done by these people are now being done by robots. So if 33% of jobs are going to be automated, there's no point in continuing to train children as robots because they won't be able to compete with the real thing. So we have to teach them how to think. They have to learn how to become problem solvers. Now, knowledge is important, literacy, numeracy, etc. It's very important, but I would say equally important is know-how. And qualifications are important, but for me, equally important are skills. And so I think children should have a more authentic education and being more empowered as they were with finding fancy books to get involved, to get a hands-on learning experience, to figure it out for themselves through their own curiosity, so they enjoy what they're doing. And we see how much anxiety in children today because the curriculum doesn't resonate with who they are as human beings. And they find dealing with modern education a problem. So let's be more creative in the way we allow children to learn. Now, I'm not saying everyone should be forced to read Fighting Fancy, but let them read something that they actually enjoy, rather than trying to cram Shakespeare down their throats at an early age. That's the way to turn them off reading. Let them enjoy what they read, and they will graduate when they're ready to read Shakespeare. There's a drive towards more academic principles in everything in learning. In mathematics, children need context. Probably all teachers. How many of you can do this quadratic equation? That's a handful. And yet we require our children to learn these formulas. For what reason? We've got these devices called smartphones that can do that for you. You need to know when and why to use the equations. Let's put some context into children's lives. Let them be engaged in their learning. If you're flying across the Atlantic next time, would you rather your pilot have learned how to fly by reading a book or using simulation software? It's a game. Oh, it can't teach you anything, surely. Yeah, I think I'd rather go with the game. And games-based learning, it's natural because it allows children to learn on their own terms, at their own speed, and discover. So this child playing Minecraft realizes that by applying heat of a furnace to sand, they create glass, and they use that glass and they put it into their buildings they've created. If you told them the components of how to make glass, they've probably forgotten about it, but because they're doing it, they remember. So make this learning more playful, let them get more hands-on, build a website, make a game, do something robotics, get them active. And allow them to collaborate, because that's how we actually operate in the workplace. We don't sit in little silos in the workplace. We work together because we're all different. So let's have code clubs in schools, and where they can help teach each other. Again, if the teacher can't do it, let them do it together, going beyond the classroom. And I think this cartoon kind of sums up my main gripe about school, is that it doesn't recognize individuality, and great minds don't all think the same, all think alike. The test here today is to climb the tree. Are you telling me an elephant is useless because it can't climb a tree? Together, we can do great things. And as Ken Robbins said, the problem with conformity in education is that people are not standardized to begin with. So why do we try and standardize them? It's because we want to test them against the same metric. We want to have an education system with an exam system. So we can, using children effectively as guinea pigs to assess school league tables rather than worrying about what the children are actually learning themselves. So we must move away from this relentless testing, this nuclear arms race in homework, because it's creating more anxiety in children. It worries me that the government's now looking to China for best practice in mathematics. At the same time, China are looking to us for how to become more creative, because they want to move from made in China to designed in China. And that requires thought and thinking and creativity. So why are we trying to strip creativity out of our classes? We're marginalizing the arts. This is ridiculous. We should never underestimate the contribution that music, art, drama makes in diverse thinking, self-expression and self-determination, the very raw materials of the creative industries that are so important to us as a nation. And so arts and science should no longer be a question of either or. Leonardo da Vinci, the world's greatest polymath, was also an engineer and a mathematician as well as the world's greatest painter. So let's combine arts. Let's talk about STEM subjects, of course, science, technology, engineering, and maths, but never ever marginalize the arts. The arts what gives that sort of magic, bringing the arts and science to create that magic fairy dust that creates all the products and services and individual thought that we have. And let's not keep punishing children for making mistakes. There should be multiple solutions to answers. You know, for me, failure is just success, work in progress. So, summarizing all that up, we often talk about equal opportunities. Didn't actually exist in the analog world. It can exist in the digital world. Any child, given the right digital making skills, the right entrepreneurial spirit, who can collaborate, might not become the next Mark Zuckerberg, but might find a way to reach a global audience via super high-speed broadband to make a product or service which they can become a job maker rather than just a job seeker. So for me, life is a game. I've enjoyed all of it, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian, and I'm sure everyone will agree that was an amazing start to the day. I would love to sit and listen to you talk. Unfortunately, we're running a little bit over, so we're not going to have time for any questions just now, but Ian, you are around till lunchtime,
yes,
so I'm sure you're going to be inundated with people wanting to ask you things.
I think we should have at least one question there. Let's override that. Oh, anyone got... Unless you're desperate for that cup of tea. Anyone want burning question? Gentleman at the front.
I'm Bob Harrison, and like you, Ian, I was involved in the nice to see you in the reform of the ICT national curriculum. Just two things that arise. The first one is it's not true that legally every school has to teach computing, because academies and free schools don't. So
all right, I should have said state school.
Yeah. Well, no, even state schools. But anyway, that's secondary. What I would like your opinion on is, I think you and I both agree that the reform of the national curriculum was hijacked by the British Computer Society, and a lot of the creativity that you and I wanted to see in the curriculum got knocked out. Would you agree that was the case?
Well, I wouldn't say it's been hijacked. Obviously, they helped build the curriculum, and to their credit, British Computer Society and Computer School have done a great job having centres of excellence that teach other schools in their area what to do. But it's a starting point. We are really at the starting point. The important thing is that we have got computing on the curriculum, and that's a world first. So let's build on that I'd rather try and build rather than criticise, because we know creativity is the most important thing. So it's a question of evolving the curriculum, I hope. But otherwise, I don't think the DfE would have taken it on board, because if all about creativity, they'd probably said no. So let's move on from where we are.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to stop. We're running about 10 minutes late, so if we could start the sessions rather than 25 past, we could start the next letter sessions at 35 past, and we'll keep running 10 minutes late until make it up at lunchtime. So can I ask you again to thank Ian so much for such a wonderful talk.
Thank you very much.